year, my panel is 50% of what my panel was supposed to be. I am very happy to say that my person awaiting transplant and his wife are actually in the hospital right now awaiting a transplant. So you're not going to get that perspective today from them, but I'm sure that my fill-in, Scott over here, will be an excellent replacement. And, you know, as Robin mentioned, I have been involved in transplant and organ donation essentially for my entire career. My background is critical care, where I took care of deceased donors who, you know, were, and their family members who were proceeding to donation. And, you know, it is a heartbreaking decision when you're faced with that. But when the transplant team started at Harrisburg, where I was working in the critical care unit, when we opened up our transplant program, I thought, wow, I would really like to see the other side of this, because I saw all the sadness on the deceased donor side of things, and I wanted to see some of the good things that happened with transplant. So that's why I made that transition. I really thought it would be like a really cool place to work for a couple of years, and, you know, 22 years later, I'm still there. So, yeah. And I'm very fortunate that I work with an awesome team of people. End-stage renal disease, transplantation is a very complex process, and the road to transplantation is not an easy one for our patients that need transplant. But you know we're not in this alone, and we tell patients that you know, we truly are a team. And, you know, our dialysis unit is part of that team. Our nephrologist office is part of that team. But the most important part of the team is our patients, because, you know, that's why we're here, and that's why what we do. You know, the wait for transplant is very, very long. When I started in transplant in 2000, we told patients they were going to wait 2 to 3 years for transplant. And now we're telling people that you're going to wait 5, 6, 7 years for transplant. You know, patients and family members get very discouraged while they're waiting for transplant. It's a very long wait. And sometimes I think people wonder, are they ever going to get a transplant? Because, you know, it's a very long time. So today I have some panelists here that are going to share their experience. Lindsay here, this is Lindsay Arnold. She has a master's degree in criminology, and she is a criminal investigator for the Pennsylvania Department of Corrections. So on your best behavior today. She lives in Harrisburg with her new husband, Jeff, and their 2 boys and 3 dogs. Lindsay actually discovered her recipient's need for transplant on a social media post. And in true investigator fashion, she decided to learn more about living donation, and she became a living kidney donor in October of 2018. Her recipient, who was supposed to be here with us today, got something that we talked about earlier today and is not able to be here with us. But Lindsay is going to share part of George's story as well. And then sitting next to Lindsay is Scott Little. And Scott, I'm happy to say, is approaching the 12th anniversary of receiving his kidney transplant from a living donor that he really only knew casually. He is a communications major at the Pennsylvania House of Representatives. So last night at 4:30, when I found out that my other panelists weren't going to be able to make it today, I said, Scott, you're like the only guy I know that can come and talk about this with like 12 hours notice. So can you please do it? And he's like, sure. What time do I need to be there? So thank you, Scott, for filling in. Scott is actually also married to a living kidney donor, and I want to give his wife, Mitzi, a lot of credit because she donated her kidney to her mother-in-law. So they have a really interesting story to tell as well. Scott also is a member of a national organ donor speaking group, which travels the country telling stories about, to encourage other people to consider living donation. He needed his transplant because of polycystic kidney disease, which obviously runs in his family. And he also has a personal connection to healthcare professionals because his daughter is an IV nurse at Lancaster General Hospital. We were just talking about her at lunchtime. So Scott, I'm going to start with you. Can you just kind of share your personal experience with kidney disease?
Sure. Is this turned on? Okay, here we go. It's directional. First of all, thank you for asking me. No matter, I would have been here if it was 5 minutes notice. It's a story. It's, my belief is that good stories need to be repeated, and I think I have a pretty darn good story. It's an experience that I wouldn't wish on anyone in terms of having PKD, but the experience I've had in almost 12 years has been one that I would wish on anybody. I can guarantee that. I've been places, Beck and I were talking about it before. It's just been an incredible, almost 12 years. September 10th is my anniversary. My mother's mother died 3 days after giving birth due to, I think the death certificate said renal issues. At that time, PKD was not something, I don't know what the proper terminology is, wasn't recognized or however, but we've found out that that's what it was. It was related to that. And then my mother had her first transplant in her 40s, and 4 of us were tested, and 2 of us had the gene at the time. Another of my siblings developed it later on, and I have a sister who's had a liver kidney transplant, and a brother who, we like to say, if he didn't brush his teeth for 10 years, he'd go to the dentist and get a glowing report. He has the gene, but he's as crazy as he ever was. And that's just the way he's going to be. So he's doing very, very well. That's my background. I got tested positive, went under the care of a nephrologist. Obviously, things started to slowly, I'll say, tail. I felt great. Like at 50, I felt like I'm probably hitting 50, and I'm just slowing down a little bit. But it really wasn't that bad. Then I went into my nephrologist, and he said, you need to get listed. And so I went out in the car and started crying right away because I figured, I've been under a doctor's care, my mother was, and this will never happen to me. There's a small chance of it. And so he challenged me in a kind way to find a living donor, and that was my goal. And so it took me a year and a half to find her. Lindsay and I were laughing because social media, in the respect that we know it right now, it existed then, but it isn't like it is right now. So I had no Facebook post or no tweet or anything like that. So I did it the old-fashioned way. After a year, I wrote a letter with my story on it and hooked it to an email and sent it to everybody that I know. And one of my friends at church did the exact same thing with my letter and sent it to everybody she knew. And that's how I found my donor. And so one morning in July, I got a call from my nephrologist, and he said, I want to see you as soon as possible, because I had installed the internal portions of peritoneal dialysis. I never was on dialysis, but I had the internal part. And I hung up the phone and said some not so nice words in the hallway at work because I knew what was going to happen. And that night she came to the house. I guess if that's how it's to ideally happen, that's how it happened. I never used this. We scheduled the surgery, and she told me, one of the cool things, she gave me a bag and said it had a card in it. If you want one of mine, it's yours. And the other thing in it was a can of red kidney beans. And she said, when do you want to get this done? And I started crying immediately. I thought it was so cool because the doctors let us decide as opposed to saying you're going in this day. And so we chose 2 months away, and my dad freaked out, like, why can't we have it tomorrow? And Denise, who was a motorcycle rider and still is, had a card in her pocketbook saying, if anything happens to me, one of my kidneys goes to Scott Little. So we had it in September, and I can tell you my numbers. I think I'm 10 something, and I drink a lot of this, and I follow my doctor's orders and get my checkups every year, and I've traveled internationally. For the people who are recipients, I am hope. I can't tell you what's going to happen. I can't tell you what's not going to happen, but I can tell you what can happen. You don't have to rappel a 20-story building in October like I'm going to do in Harrisburg. But there's a chance. And for people who hear like end stage and think all they hear is end, all you need is hope. And I am hope. Simple as that.
So can I follow that up with another question? Like, did you have any reservations about sharing your need? Like, kind of what went through your head about how do I do this?
No, I'm a very competitive person, and so like I know about on all the aspects of the possibilities of obtaining a kidney. I know all the acronyms and whatever, but he. Like I said, in a very nice way, he didn't say, like, get the heck out there and find someone, but he just said, your best shot is a living donor. And I knew it. Dr. Diamond did a very good job of explaining the numbers to me. Mm-hmm. And I went out in the car when I was done crying. I said, you know what? Pardon me. Damn it. I'm going to find somebody. And I'm going to find them. And it's just a matter of, like, you all know that one of you could be a match for me if I needed one right now. Mm-hmm. But if you don't know that I need one, then we never meet. It's just that it's really that simple. Mm-hmm. So I have to find somebody. And so it took me a year to figure it out, the letter to the email thing. I don't know why. I guess I'm not a very good communications person. The one big job I had, I kind of failed at, or I didn't do it in a timely manner. Yeah. But I found them, and I found other ways. I have a friend who needed a transplant, and he and his wife put a business card in a Christmas card to everybody that sent, said, Ken needs a kidney. And they ended up finding the donor at a recreational volleyball match because she got the card. So, yeah. Wow. If you really want this to happen, you can't be hesitant. I mean, that might be a little harsh, but like you can't be. You just can't be. You either have to be or find somebody who can do it for you, be your advocate for you.
All right, speaking of advocates, I'm going to let Lindsay share George's story since he can't be here to share, and then I'm going to ask you some questions as well.
So I don't know a ton about when everything started for him. I think it was about I donated in October 26th of 2018. So I think it was about 5 years before that when it kind of like started to spiral, and he had a family history as well. And he ended up only being on dialysis for 3 weeks before our transplant. But so he was listed, and George is a very private person. He's a teacher. He's been an English teacher all his life. He's very humble. But his wife said, you need to, and the phrase she used was, you need to shake the trees, George. So one night I'll never forget, it was April 20th, 2018, and they were heading up to Penn State. His son is a student there. And she said, why don't you, share your story? And his Facebook post had a picture of him and his dog on the couch. And the dog is probably what ended up getting me. If I'm going to be honest, I love dogs. So he really knew how to pull at the heartstrings for that post. But he posted it, and so George is an English teacher at my high school. I went to Cedar Cliff. I never had him. I knew of him. We never talked to each other. Some of my friends had him. But it was a Friday night, and I was out with my friends at happy hour, and one of my old gym teachers, Kathy Hubler, shared his post, and I saw it, and I immediately responded and said, I'm going to call Pinnacle on Monday because I just feel, I can't tell you why, I've never considered organ donation. I just felt compelled to help. And that's the hardest question for me to answer. That's what, our story was on a bunch of news stations. We were on Good Morning America, and that's what everyone wants to know. Why did you do it? And that's as good as an answer as it can come up with. So I called on Monday. They set me up. I tested in May, and again in the long 2-day testing in September. And then I found out in the end of September that I was a match. And they said, do you want to tell him yourself? And I said, I don't even know him. I don't know how to get in touch with him. So I reached out to my old gym teacher, who's also a family friend. And I said, can you help me? And she said, of course, I know his wife. And he's a huge Penn State fan. And I am a huge Ohio State fan. So that was kind of our thing. So she was able to get the Nittany Lion mascot costume from Penn State Harrisburg. And I showed up at his door on September 7th, 2018, and I rang his door as the Nittany Lion. And we actually have video. That's basically why it went viral. I mean, I shared the video with my friends, but it spread worldwide. It was so crazy. And Good Morning America reached out, and it was unbelievable. People magazine, in 2018, we made the top 10 feel-good stories of the year. But so they also, thank you. They also allowed to pick our transplant date, which I thought was really nice. So we chose October 26th, 2018. And it's really unbelievable because I was told that the chance of two non-related people being a perfect match for one another is a 1 in 100,000 chance. So, but I went in knowing that even if I wasn't a perfect match for him, that we could do a cross match and I could donate to someone else and he would get a kidney in exchange for that. And as a donor, you never know what to expect going in. They tell you, you may not have a relationship with them. Your recipient may not take care of the organ. And, that's tough. That's tough to swallow. But at that point, I wanted to help him. And I knew he had a younger son. He was in college. And I wanted him to have his life back. So even though our story may be, we say we're poster children for kidney donation, but I mean, we couldn't be closer. We speak every day. I talk to him more than I talk to some of my girlfriends. His wife and son have become a second family. And it all is because of his Facebook post. Had his wife not encouraged him to do that, I never would have saw it. And I would never be sitting here today.
And, it's kind of funny how things go together, right? Because I happen to be on vacation with some friends in Nashville when your story went viral. And my friend happens to be a graduate of Cedar Cliff High School. And he's like, hey, do you know these people? And I'm sitting there going, maybe. It's kind of funny how, the world works. But Scott, I'm going to circle back to you and ask you, do you feel like you were adequately prepared for transplant when you got to it? Because that's something I struggle with as a transplant coordinator is, am I just throwing a bunch of information at people and how much actually gets absorbed? And can you really come to grips with it until it actually happens to you? So do you feel you were adequately prepared? And if you weren't, what do you think could we do a little bit better?
I think I was, and part of it was because my mother had gone through a transplant before. Like I told part of my mom's story, but she and my dad, like when I called my parents and said I need to get listed, my father said to me, it's going to be a wild ride because you just don't, it's like you're falling and you have no idea when you're going to be caught, or even if you're going to be caught, you're hoping to be caught, and you have a very large role to play in whether or not you are caught out of midair. And so, how do you go about bettering your chance of being caught? To the credit of the medical professionals, you do all you can, and you did all you could, but a lot of it is then put in your hands, and for some people that's not a comfortable place to be. Mm-hmm. I have a friend from high school who told me her brother-in-law was in need of a transplant. This is a very intelligent man, a very well-educated man who was a very quiet person. He and his wife both were, and he needed a life-saving organ and just kind of hoped that it would happen. And it did eventually, but he went through, he had to stop teaching. He made a lot of sacrifices that quite possibly could have been avoided. Mm-hmm. And again, you need to, as George's wife did, if he couldn't do it, he needed to find somebody to advocate for him. And thankfully, she did, because, I might have found somebody eventually, but what would I have had to go through until I found that person? So the medical staff did, and we tell in our presentations, they're here to help you, but I'm not your only patient. So if I have a question, I have to. Mm-hmm. And it's the old, there's no stupid question, except for the one you don't ask. Mm-hmm. You have to ask, why am I taking these? I know you did. Somebody did. I'm steroid-induced diabetic because of my transplant. And I swear to you, I was never told. And I know I've never said that to a medical professional in 12 years.
It's in black and white in his pre.
I know it is, and it doesn't. And again, it doesn't happen to everyone. I swear to you, I was not told. And so when they tell me that the endocrinologist is coming in to talk to me, and I'm on 300 whatevers of prednisone, and I just broke down like I know they never told me this is gonna stink. My wife's there and she's like, it's okay. It's going to be okay. And I got this box of pills and now I'm going to be diabetic and you got to be kidding me. And that means I'm going to forget this. This is done. This is what I'm going to do the rest of my life. Drink water and maybe eat this once in a while. And that's going to be the end of it. And obviously it's not, but because I've managed it and I follow my doctor's orders. So you have to listen too. I know you didn't tell me. But it's all worked out. But it's really you do so much, but you have to find that person, whether it's you or George's wife. Mm-hmm. You really have to find that person. So you really did a great job. You really did. You do all you could.
Good. So, Lindsay, I'm going to kind of segue to you, too, because you said you'd never really thought about organ donation before all this. And when you made that initial call and Tiffany said, well, these are the things you're going to have to do in order to be, proven to be healthy enough to do this, were you taken back by that? Did you think that it was going to be all that it is?
No, I figured it was going to be a pretty lengthy process. But my first thought is like, there's no way that my kid there's no way that no one, they want my kidney. There's no way I'm not healthy. There's no way. But honestly, the testing wasn't bad. I think the glucose test is what I hated the most. And I guess I don't have any children. I guess that's what pregnant women have to go through. But I did not like that. That's the one thing I hated the most. But no, I thought you guys prepared everyone really well. Like the long day when I had the CT scan and everything, I talked to psych, I talked to the dietitian, I talked to a social worker, and I think they really prepare you and present you with, every scenario they possibly can, and say that this person may not take care of the organ, you may not have a relationship with them, they may not, be thankful for what you've done for them. You can't control any of that, and you have to want to do it because it's something that you're driven to do yourself. It has to be like an internal motivation. So I thought I was really well prepared, and I wasn't surprised by all the testing. I actually thought it was pretty streamlined, honestly, for as much as needs to be done.
That's good to hear, because oftentimes I think people call the office and, like, hey, I want to donate a kidney. When can we do this? And,
Well, I remember them. The first blood test I went in for, she said, the phlebotomist said, do you get queasy when you get lightheaded when you get blood drawn? I'm like, oh, no, it's no big deal. And she starts laying the tubes out. And it's like, I think we got to like 20, 21, 22. I'm like, okay, maybe. But no, it wasn't bad at all. And totally worth it.
Yeah. So obviously, Lindsay and Scott are both very big advocates for organ donation, living donation, transplantation in general. Can I ask both of you, why do you feel it's important to share your story?
Do you want me to go first? I think, seeing a successful story is anything feel good is always an attention getter, I think, even if not everything goes well. But just getting your story out there is so very important. And like I said, it wasn't even on my radar before any of this. And now I am so involved in, the community, and one of my lifelong friends now is a kidney donor who I met on a living kidney donor support group on Facebook. Because as much as they prepare you in the office, it's nice to be able to talk to someone who's actually been through it, but you have to advocate for yourself, as he said. Even if I can't imagine being in that position and wanting to ask, because it's the big ask, as a lot of people refer to it. And I'm a very humble person as well. I imagine that's very difficult, but we have to shake the trees, as Leanne said, and we have to get everyone's story out there, because obviously the more that we hear about it, and I don't know if it's because I donated, but I feel like I hear more about it in the mainstream media today, which I think is a great thing. And when one person hears a story, they come out and say, well, my so-and-so got a transplant, or my friend is a donor. And I think it really, it kind of snowballs. So it's all about getting the word out there.
I'll tell you a very quick story first. It is related to this. One of the other twists in my wife's story, donating to my mother, it was my mother's second transplant. The first was cadaveric. I like one of the cool things, I get to use these really good. So it's not a deceased donor, it's a cadaveric donor. Is that this is my second marriage. My first wife was a 14-year breast cancer survivor. And my second wife's donation to my mother, and so we won't get into the hows and whys and how all that works. I have my beliefs, whatever. But so that's another twist to it also. When my wife, when she was battling breast cancer for those 14 years, one of the challenges we faced was finding somebody who'd walked in those shoes also. And this is the same thing. I've had cases, it was like a month ago in church. We had a guest speaker and got talking to them, and it turns out their spouse was a transplant recipient. And, and we got to talking. You just never know who needs to hear A, your specific story, or B, as Lindsay said, needs to hear a good story. I don't watch a lot of television, but I'm told Chicago Med does a surprisingly frequent number of stories on organ donation. That's the good part. The kind of the bad part is these things don't happen in 60 minutes, minus the commercials and the other story about the other person in the other part of the hospital. But I mean, it brings awareness to the situation, and you just never know. There's, somebody has a sign in a yard that says, call this number for a transplant. You just never know who's going to drive by who could be that one person that you need. I said before, I started being repetitive, but if you really want this to happen, if you really want to still be a father, husband, dog owner, golfer, active, whatever, great uncle to 3 newborns in the next 3 months. If you really want that, you have to make people aware that you have a need. You just have to. You just have to.
Got to find your why.
You have to find a why, and please don't. But like for me, the why was easy. I didn't even think about it. It just was a why. Just got to find that one person. So, may I say something real quick? Because I'm intrigued by the donor-recipient relationship. My donor, I think I've embarrassed her because I'm very active. My brother and I have done the 5 boroughs 40-mile bike ride in New York City twice since I've had a transplant. Rappelled this building for Big Brothers Big Sisters in October. And Denise will say, "Oh, it's not again. What are you doing now? Jeez, what are you doing next?" But she will ask if I've had some minor issues, very minor issues. And why didn't you tell me that you, I forget why I hurt my leg doing something, whatever. Why didn't you tell me that? They want to know how you're doing. And or you take, to me, it's better than this watch. All you want you to do is take care of the gift. That's all I want you to do. It's like any other gift you get, except it's really special. It's better than a watch or a really nice car. And that's all that they want you'd want George to do. Just take care of it. Just take care of it.
Does anybody have any questions for our panelists? So remember, this hour we're supposed to be 4 different people talking. So
I just want to know what the average cost is for a donor, and if there's any programs that can help with that.
So there is no cost to the donor for any of the testing, the surgery, the hospitalization, the follow-up visits. The only costs that donors would have, like out-of-pocket costs, would be travel to and from the transplant center and time off of work if they don't have the vacation time to do that. There are actually quite a few organizations that do help with those expenses. The National Living Donor Assistance Program, the National Kidney Registry, a paired exchange program has some donor protection things in there as well. The paired exchange thing is probably the coolest thing that has happened to me in my career. That, if Lindsay wanted to donate to Scott and Chris wanted to donate to Lynn, but they weren't compatible, then, we just kind of swap kidneys. When I started in transplant, that never happened. If you were the wrong blood type, I would say, no, you can't do this. It's very nice of you to offer. There's other ways you can help, but you can't donate your kidney to your person. And now we start that conversation with, you might not be able to donate to your person, but if you're healthy enough, you may be able to donate on behalf of your person. And it has really, for us, we've done more than 80 paired exchange transplants in the last 10 years. So it has changed the whole landscape of transplant. It's taken a lot of barriers away from having a living donor, because we know that living donor transplants work better. They last longer. It's a much better quality organ than someone who is, dying, essentially, because things happen when people are dying. And although deceased donor transplants work well, they don't work as well as living donors. So we've really taken a lot of the barriers away from people who want to be living donors through supporting them financially. For time off of work was always the big one. There's a lot of people that don't have 4 weeks of vacation time that they need to recover from surgery. So there are programs out there now that will, reimburse their salary essentially while they recover from surgery. It's been amazing. But no, you didn't have to pay for anything related to your donation, right?
No. The only thing is, I would eventually love to see some state legislation that would give donors some time off for a full organ transplant. Right. I mean, I had to take vacation. Luckily, I was only off 11 days of actual work time. But unfortunately, not everyone has that luxury. Mm-hmm. And if that is what's standing in the way of, essentially saving someone's life, that's a shame.
Yeah.
So that's the only frustration that not for myself, but that I would feel for, a donor in that position.
Mm-hmm.
It's being worked on.
Yeah.
Work a little harder. You have some connections.
Well, I don't do that part. I mean, and to your point, it's being worked on. It's been being worked on. It's a hurdle. I was on a hike a couple years ago in Berks County and managed to I'm a dog owner too, and there was a young lady that I was by myself. There's a young lady had 2 dogs, and of course I said, "You mind if I walk with you up the 2-mile hike up near Hawk Mountain?" Mm-hmm. And we get to the top, and we just started talking, and this isn't "Hey, how you doing? I got a transplant." It isn't that kind of life. But I mean, we just started talking, and I said this came around after a 2-mile hike. And we started talking. She said, "Yeah," she said, I would really love to donate, but I'm a vet tech over in Berks or near Allentown," and she said, I can't afford. If I take off, there's a chance my job might not be there when I get back. Mm-hmm. And it just it really broke my heart, because this is, that just shouldn't be. So ironically, I started working for a state rep. I handle public relations for a few state representatives, and one of them just had a transplant last year, mm-hmm. and I just got assigned to her, and she's working on something with someone else on it, but it's a hurdle, and it's one of the last hurdles. I'm mm-hmm. sorry, I can't take off work.
Yeah,
to help save your life. Mm-hmm. How sad is that? Mm-hmm. We should be able to do better. We can do better.
Hold on. Hold on, we can't hear you. Who's talking? Point.
What tests do you run to determine compatibility?
So for direct donation, someone has to be blood type compatible, and they also have to be, DNA genetically compatible, right? So we mix the donor blood with the recipient blood to make sure that the recipient blood's not fighting off the donor's blood. But again, with paired exchange, if you are not compatible with the person that you want to donate to, and you can get through all the tests to make sure you're healthy, then, that kind of compatibility hurdle actually goes away, because you can still donate. Your person still gets a living kidney. It's just not from you, basically. So, there are some other things that we consider. Size is one of them. Age is one of them. So even in the paired exchange, we will put compatible pairs in the paired exchange. We kind of explain it as trading up for a better donor in some cases. So if, we have a parent who's 25 years older than their kid, we would want to get a younger kidney for that recipient so that it would last a little bit longer. So we'll put those kind of pairs in the paired exchange, or, some 4'11" wife that wants to donate to her, 6 foot, 350-pound husband. The kidneys size is going to match up. We'll put those kind of patients in paired exchange to basically kind of trade up for a better donor.
That really happened, right? You had like a 17
That happens all the
donor
time.
pair. I mean, we met one of those families where the wife was like really petite, the husband was like football player, and I think it was a 17 donor paired exchanged when they did it. That was
Yeah, paired exchange is fascinating. I mean, I could talk for hours about paired exchange. We're actually in the Guinness Book of World Records because we were involved in the largest paired exchange ever done. We were like smack dab in the middle of a 35 pair chain. It didn't all happen on the same day because logistically, that's not going to happen. But it was like really cool to say that you were part of that, one Good Samaritan donor started a chain of 35 transplants. So, it really is. It's amazing. It is amazing to see it unfold. Logistically, it's a nightmare to coordinate. I will be the first one to tell you that. It is a lot of phone calls and sending stuff back and forth, but in the end, all these people are getting transplanted. So it is worth all of that work to see all these people getting transplanted when, 20 years ago, that didn't happen. So, it's pretty cool to see that happen.
I had a question. I was curious if you could talk more about what the recovery was like after each of your procedures.
Sure, I'm gonna go first. I was actually expecting mine to be much worse. However, the day after surgery, I remember I went up against my nurse's advice. I walked up to the ICU to see George and we took a picture, and you can just see the pain on my face, and he looks like he had life breathed into him. He looks incredible. And I look like I got hit by a truck, truly. So right away, actually, I think the surgery, I can't speak for recipients, but I think it might actually be harder on the donor because you're taking something. Well, you were feeling sick already, and I felt fine, and then they remove an organ. So I think initially it hit me harder than it hit him because he felt better. I had pain in the hospital, but like I said, I went back to work in 11 days. I think I was off like for a total of like 2 weeks, actually, like calendar time. I play flag football again. Am
Not after 11 days, you didn't.
not after 11 days. I
Okay.
did not. No.
Just clarifying that.
No. My team did win the championship that October, but I was only in the picture. I didn't play. I didn't play. It honestly wasn't terrible. The biggest thing is I did go to PT for a month because I lost all of my core strength. But that was not, that wasn't a really big deal. It wasn't much of a sacrifice. But now I feel as healthy as ever. I have no no limitations other than like maybe not playing rugby or ice hockey. But other than that, my life is completely the same. And I think a lot of the times people think that your life is going to change for the worse when you donate a kidney, and really nothing has changed. So, and I just got my labs this last December. my EGFR is at like 89, which is the best it's been. It was only 98 before transplant, so it's amazing what your body can do, you know, on its own. So.
I actually, I'll say this, I actually felt, when I was on the cart going back, I said, if you can make me feel, if I feel as good as I do right now as after transplant, I'll take that. I just didn't realize how bad I felt till I felt a heck of a lot better. So that's why I said I was approaching 50. I thought, you know, just when you're 50, like you're halfway cooked, you know. Well, you know, and I just didn't really feel. I realized how bad I felt. So I was told I was going to be off 6 weeks, and I was off 6 weeks. And so the surgery was Friday. I got home on Tuesday, and I have a brother and 2 sisters. My parents were alive at the time. Nice neighborhood, and we just kind of started setting things up, like who's going to stay with me, and we had some cats, like who's going to do the cat box, all that stuff. My wife was working, and so we I figured that out. And after, I think on Friday, I started walking around the yard, and the next week I started walking a little further, and then I finally told my wife after a week, like, you can go back to work. And my sister sat with me one day, my relatives, and I said, look, I'm going to be real honest with you. I said, I don't need anybody to stay with me. So I started walking, and I live in Elizabethtown. So I started walking, and it was like a Tom Hanks thing. I just started walking. And one day I just thought, like, I'm going to walk. I walked to Kmart, which was about, it's like 3 miles.
And you couldn't get home?
I couldn't drive. Because you can't drive. So I called my wife. I said, "Do you need anything in Kmart?" She said, "What are you doing at Kmart?" So I walked here. So I have to walk back home. So I walked back home again. I rode my bike the one day. I got caught in a rainstorm, which you're not supposed to, be. That's another thing. That's because you didn't tell me about being diabetic. I rode my bike in the rain, just to pay you back. Like I went. We have a trail near our house. I started riding my bike. Like I felt I could have gone back to work in maybe 2 weeks, but I didn't. And so I went to church and sat in the sacristy and listened, and then walked home, which is only a mile and a half. Did things like that. I got around some things. I stayed away from people as much as I could. I obeyed my doctor's orders, but I just felt great. And Denise was, again, I think maybe a week or so. And yeah, it just, like, you just don't know how bad it is. I know that's not everybody. I get that, and not everybody works out this way. But again, the message that we have is like, this is what's possible, and that's all we want to tell people is this is what can happen to you.
I'll add, George said the same thing. He said, I didn't know how sick I was until the next day, and then you look back in pictures. He had, the moon face, and he looks like a totally different person. Like his skin actually had more color the next day. So, but I think it's different for everyone. I am glad. I was in the hospital from Friday to Monday, and I remember Dr. Yang asking me if I wanted to go home Sunday, but I think it's good. I think those 3 days were good. My living kidney donor support group, I'm still in there, and there's some people that are going home after 24 hours, and I personally would not have done well, because it's a major surgery. But Pinnacle, I can't say enough good things about, the care that we both received at Pinnacle in Harrisburg. It was amazing.
Becca, how likely are patients who come to you, how likely are they to choose a living related donor? And if not, like, what are their reasons for not wanting to pursue living related?
Living donation?
Yeah.
If I could answer that, we'd have a lot more living donors. I think there's barriers we never hear about. We hear a lot of parents say, I'm not going to put my kid at risk for this. I will just wait. We do a lot of education because just wait. I don't think that a lot of people that are just waiting 7 years realize how sick they're going to get in that time frame. So we do a lot of education with, it is our job to make sure that donors meet the criteria and it is safe for them to donate. And we're not going to let them go forward if they don't meet that criteria. So it's our job to do that. If they're not healthy enough and if the risk is too high, we're not going to let them donate. But if you decide you don't want them to donate, then you become sicker the longer you wait for transplant. And then the burden that you thought you were placing on them by not letting them donate then becomes the burden of taking care of you while you're sick. So we do try to put it in perspective for them that, you know, they have a reason for wanting to donate. They want to see their person be healthy and be able to do all those things that they could do before they got sick. I think that's one of the biggest burdens that, one of the biggest barriers that recipients don't want to accept living donors. They have a sense of, you know, that feeling like they owe somebody something, or don't want to feel, you know, obligated in any way, because you can't repay that. You can't repay that. I mean, you just can't. You can do what Scott said and you can take good care of yourself, but I think sometimes that it weighs heavy on people's hearts.
Becca, do you see any unique issues with people of color? And I ask that question as a woman of color, as executive director of the Kidney Foundation, who talks to people all the time. And sometimes people are reticent because they don't trust the healthcare system. I mean, I grew up in the segregated South. I could tell you stories. Some of that reticence is based in reality and fact. And so it's just a matter of educating them about how the system works and how the healthcare system works. And I just wondered if here in central Pennsylvania, you run into issues where you notice people that might have some reticence and asking for a donation. As you said, the barriers, they don't want to ask the family member. They feel like it's asking too much. But are you finding any, or identifying any areas where you think that some of them may have to be with distrust of the healthcare system, not being certain about whether they're going to be treated fairly? Just asking.
Yeah, you know, I honestly don't think I can answer that, Phyllis, because I think it's an individual thing, right? It's kind of what your life experience has been. You know, we do our best to educate everybody about living donation. Like, everyone on our team talks about living donation and why it's so important. Because there's 100,000 people waiting, you're going to wait a very long time. And, you know, it is our obligation to do no harm, and we're not going to harm living donors. We're not going to make somebody sick in order to make somebody better. Then no one gains there. So
you're preaching to the choir. I know this,
Yeah.
but I talk to people who ask me questions and have concerns. I'm just be honest with you, that are about, can I trust the healthcare system? Or, you know, not just a living donation, but should I donate my organ? Should I say I'm going to be an organ donor on my license, because will they just let me die because somebody needs my organ? And so
my husband was one of those people when we got married.
Oh,
He
good.
was the same thing.
You fixed
well,
it.
I'm not going to be an organ donor because, you know, then they won't take care of me. I'm looking at him like, what are you talking about? Yeah. So it is a misconception. I understand it.
Yeah.
I don't understand it, but I've heard it.
Yeah, I do. I'll be honest with you. I do understand it, but I do a lot of talking to people and sharing from my personal experience and being honest as an OR nurse, as well as the executive director of the Kidney Foundation. And just, I mean, our bags all say KS for kidney, let's talk, the bags you got. And so I'm really encouraging honest conversations.
Right.
No value judgment. Nobody's going to say this is right, this is wrong, but I want people to able to come to me and say, this is a concern I have, because if you don't address it, then people are dying, and people of color are disproportionately represented in dialysis centers as opposed to transplants. I'm very passionate, as Barbara mentioned, about this because I know it's real. And so I just want to encourage all caregivers here that have a relationship with your families, that if they have some concerns, that you'll have an honest conversation with them about it, that you'll have the courage to find out what some of the issues are and have an honest conversation about it. And you don't have to have the answer. You don't have to know all the answers, but you need to be willing to listen and to talk about it and to reach out to people in the area who will be able to have that conversation and support you. So Next.
When you and your
Chris, hold on. You know the rules.
this is kind of a funny question, I hope. When you and your recipient picked a date, how much did the college football schedule factor into your decision?
Well, they did make sure to move him from the ICU to his regular room at halftime during the Penn State game the following day. We're actually going to the Penn State-Ohio State game together this year. Yeah.
True. I was at a wedding in the South, and the whole wedding was about Bama play in Auburn, and all the way down. I'm at this wedding, and the score is coming down the aisle and up and down the aisle.
Oh yeah.
So
Well, the nurses in pre-op, the nurses, they had his room decorated with Penn State stuff and mine with Ohio State stuff, and they both signed banners. It was cool.
Well, thank you both. I so much appreciate you sharing your experience because, we heard some really heavy stuff this morning about COVID and things like that. I think it's so nice to hear, a patient perspective and that, getting the word out there is so important. So thank you so much for sharing, both of you.
Happy to do it.